I still remember the day I moved in like it was yesterday. It was the end of summer in 2016, and I had just secured my first real job in New York City. I had saved up enough to afford a modest one-bedroom apartment on the edge of Manhattan, in a building that was decades old but still had that old-world charm. The rent was surprisingly low for the location, which should have been my first warning, but I didn't think twice. At the time, I was too excited to start my new chapter. The apartment itself was small, with high ceilings and hardwood floors that creaked every time I walked. The walls were thin, and I could hear my neighbors' conversations through the plaster. It didn't take long before I realized that the apartment had a history. There were whispers about it among the people in the building, but no one would ever speak of it directly. It was just understood. I didn't think much of it. After all, it was just an old building. Maybe it had its quirks, but I was a city boy. I was used to the strange, the unfamiliar. That was until the first night. It was around 11 p.m. when I went to bed, the usual sounds of the city still echoing through the windows. I wasn't scared of the noise until I heard something that made my heart freeze. A faint knock on my door. At first, I thought it was the neighbor, maybe asking for sugar or something, but there was something unsettling about it. It wasn't a normal knock. It was slow, deliberate, almost too rhythmic. It continued for several minutes, almost like it was trying to get my attention. I tried to ignore it. I convinced myself it was just my imagination, maybe the building settling. But then I heard it again, the knock. This time it was louder, more urgent, and it sent chills down my spine. I got up, my hands trembling, and slowly made my way to the door. I peered through the peephole, but no one was there. Just empty hallway. I stood there for what felt like forever, staring at the door, trying to convince myself it was nothing. But then, there it was again. The unmistakable sound of knocking, echoing through the apartment. To this day, I don't know what happened that night. It felt like the air was thicker, like something unseen was waiting for me. I didn't sleep that night. The knock didn't come again, but I knew it was only the beginning. The next few days felt off, like I was living in someone else's world. The city noises, which had once been comforting, now sounded alien and distant. The shadows in my apartment seemed longer, more defined, and I started to feel like I wasn't alone. I tried to shake off the feeling. I told myself it was the stress of the new job and adjusting to a new city. Everyone said that's how you felt at first. But the unease lingered. One evening, I was sitting on the couch, working late. The only light in the apartment was the glow of my laptop screen. The rest of the place swallowed in darkness. The silence was almost suffocating, and I found myself glancing up at the door every so often. I kept thinking I heard the faintest sound, a whisper of movement from the hallway. It was around 1 a.m. when it happened again. This time, I couldn't deny what I was hearing. The knock was back, soft, methodical, coming from the other side of my door, like someone was waiting for me. I froze. My heart pounded in my chest, and for the first time, I didn't want to open that door. I felt this cold, oppressive energy that seemed to seep into my bones. I grabbed my phone, and for some reason, I felt the overwhelming need to record it. As I pressed the record button, I turned the volume up, waiting, praying that it was just the wind, or maybe someone outside my apartment having a late-night conversation. But as the seconds ticked by, the knocks grew louder, faster, more insistent. I could hear them clearly now. They weren't just at the door. It felt like they were coming from all sides of the apartment, rattling through the walls, beneath the floorboards. I panicked, my mind racing with thoughts of what could be causing it. Was someone messing with me? Or worse, was something in the building, or in the apartment, playing games with me? I darted to the window, hoping to see someone on the street, but the streetlights cast only long, ghostly shadows. The knocks continued, and now they were accompanied by a faint, whispering voice, too low to make out the words, but it was unmistakably there, soft, almost like a hiss. It wasn't human. Suddenly, the apartment grew colder. The temperature dropped drastically, like someone had opened a window in the dead of winter, and I could see my breath as I exhaled. I didn't know what to do. Should I open the door? Should I call the police? No one would believe me. No one would understand. The knock stopped, And I stood there, my heart hammering in my chest, waiting for something, anything, to happen. Then, a voice, clear, distinct, and coming from right behind me, whispered, "Let me in." I didn't look back. Couldn't. The room felt heavier now, the air thick and suffocating. The whispers grew louder, like they were coming from the walls, the ceiling, all around me. I bolted for the door, but the instant I touched the handle, it rattled violently. I stood frozen in place, as the apartment seemed to close in on me. And that's when I realized it wasn't just my door that was being knocked on. Something was trying to get in from every direction. I ran. I ran like I had never run before, out into the hall, down the stairs, and out into the night, not daring to look back. But I knew, no matter how far I ran, the apartment wasn't done with me. It had already marked me, and I could feel it, like something was still waiting for me back inside. I didn't return to the apartment for weeks. I stayed at a friend's place, telling myself that I just needed some time away to clear my head. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just the apartment that was the problem. It was something in it, something that had followed me. I could feel it, like an icy breath on the back of my neck every time I closed my eyes. But the longer I stayed away, the more I found myself drawn back. My mind couldn't let go of the unanswered questions, the terror that had taken hold of me. What was it? What had I felt in that apartment? What was knocking on my door? The fear of the unknown was gnawing at me. Finally, after a month of restless nights, I made the decision. I couldn't run forever. I had to go back. I returned to the building in the middle of a cold November evening. The air was damp, heavy with the smell of rain, and the streets were almost deserted. The building stood silent, its tall silhouette looming over the block. The elevator creaked as it made its way up to my floor, and when I stepped out into the hallway, the temperature dropped immediately. The air was thick, like it had been waiting for me. I reached my door, and my hand trembled as I slid the key into the lock. The apartment was eerily quiet. No sounds of neighbors, no noise from the street below, just silence. I stepped inside, the familiar creak of the wooden floors beneath me sending a wave of nausea through my stomach. Everything was exactly as I had left it. No signs of forced entry, no signs of anything unusual, but something felt off. The air was dense, pressing against me. I walked through the living room into the kitchen and then back into the bedroom. That's when I saw it. The window was wide open. I had never left it open. It was too cold outside for that. And there was no way it could have been blown open by the wind. This was an old, heavy window. Someone had opened it. I approached it cautiously, but as I reached for the window, the whispers returned. Low, guttural, almost like a growl. The sound came from everywhere, surrounding me. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. As the whispers grew louder, almost to the point of a scream, I spun around, heart pounding in my chest, and there, in the corner of the room, was a figure. It wasn't solid. It was like smoke, swirling and twisting into a form, but it wasn't human. It was something else, something darker, with eyes that shone like black holes, absorbing all the light around it. It didn't move. It just stood there, watching me. My mind screamed at me to run, but my body refused to move. The thing didn't need to speak. I could feel its presence, its hunger, its need to consume. The whispers were now deafening, a cacophony of voices, all saying the same thing in unison. "Let me in." The temperature plummeted again, and I could see my breath cloud in front of me. The figure started to move, slowly, gliding across the room. I stumbled back, my legs shaking, and as I did, I bumped into the table, knocking it over. The sound echoed through the apartment, and in that instant, the figure lunged forward, its form shifting, expanding, trying to engulf me. I don't know how I did it, but I ran. I ran faster than I ever thought possible, out of the apartment and down the stairs, into the cold night air. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I heard it behind me, the sound of something dragging itself through the halls, following me. I never went back to that apartment after that night. I moved out the next day, and I've been bouncing around since then. The memories still haunt me. The apartment, the knocking, the figure. It's like it's never really left. It's been over a year now, and I can still hear the whispers sometimes, late at night when I'm alone. If you ever find yourself in a building with an apartment that feels too cheap, too perfect, beware. Because sometimes the price you pay is far more than just rent. Sometimes it's your soul. I thought moving away from that building would finally bring me peace, but I was wrong. The nightmares started the night I left, and they didn't stop for weeks. In each one, I was back in that apartment, but this time I wasn't alone. The figure would appear, always just out of sight at first, then closer, always closer, until I could feel its cold breath on my skin. It wasn't just haunting my dreams. It was trying to drag me back, pull me into its darkness. At first, I tried to convince myself it was all just my imagination, some psychological effect from the fear I had experienced. Maybe I'd just been through too much too quickly, and my mind was trying to make sense of it all. But that explanation didn't sit right with me. I knew what I felt, and what I saw wasn't something a mind could invent. It was real. Then came the phone calls. It was a Thursday night, and I was sitting in my new apartment, trying to unwind after a long day. My phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but I picked it up anyway. The voice on the other end was distant, like it was coming from a tunnel. The first words I heard made my blood run cold. "You didn't think you could escape, did you?" I froze, holding the phone to my ear, my heart hammering. The voice was distorted, but it was unmistakably the same voice I had heard whispering in that apartment. That thing. I felt the same cold dread that I'd felt that night, and I knew without a doubt it had followed me. Before I could respond, the call ended. My phone went dead, the screen flickering for a moment before returning to normal. But when I looked at it, there was a new message. It was from an unknown number, but the message was chilling. "I'm still here. You can't run." I didn't sleep that night. The following weeks were a blur of strange occurrences. The lights in my apartment flickered without reason. Objects would move when I wasn't looking, and sometimes, when I would wake in the middle of the night, I could hear that same knocking, faint but unmistakable, coming from somewhere in the darkness. It was then I realized this wasn't just about the apartment. It was about me. I decided to go back. I had to find answers, no matter how terrifying they might be. I couldn't let this thing keep haunting me. I wasn't sure if I was being driven by some twisted sense of closure or if I was just foolish, but I couldn't live like this. So I returned to the building, standing in front of the door to my old apartment for the first time in months. The building was quiet just like before. The hallways were still lit by the same yellowish lights, casting long shadows on the worn carpet. But the moment I stepped through the door to the apartment, the air thickened. It was as if the apartment had been waiting for me, holding its breath. I stepped inside, and the temperature immediately dropped. The knocking started again, but this time it wasn't at the door. It was everywhere. The walls, the ceiling, beneath my feet. The sound was deafening, like a constant, rhythmic thudding, as if something was trying to get out. I walked through the apartment slowly, my heart racing, and then I saw it. The window was wide open once again. I didn't remember opening it this time. Before I could even process what was happening, a cold wind rushed in through the window, and I heard it, the whisper. Low, deliberate, almost playful. "You thought you could leave?" I turned around, and there, standing in the middle of the room, was the figure. But this time, it wasn't just smoke. It had a form, an outline. It was taller, and it seemed to pulse, as if it were alive. The black eyes that stared at me seemed to suck the light from the room, making everything darker, more oppressive. I could feel it, creeping closer, the whispers growing louder, more frantic. It was no longer just a presence. It was something hungry. The cold was unbearable now, and I was shaking. My legs were no longer cooperating, and I stumbled back, gasping for breath as the figure inched forward. And then, as I reached the door, I realized it wasn't alone. Behind the figure, there were more. Hundreds, thousands, maybe. Dark shadows, faces without features, all standing silently, watching me. They were all connected to this place, feeding off the fear, feeding off my soul. They were all trapped here, and they wanted me with them. I didn't think. I ran. I ran until my lungs burned, until my legs gave out, but I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I could feel them still behind me, closing in, the whispers growing louder in my ears. When I made it out of the building, I couldn't shake the feeling that they were still with me, that they were always watching, waiting for me to return. And I know one thing for certain. The apartment was never just a place. It was a trap, a place where something far older than I can understand has made its home. And no matter how far I go, no matter where I hide, it will always find me. Always. It's been months since I ran from that place. But the nightmares haven't stopped. Neither has the feeling that something is following me. It's always there, just out of reach, like a shadow that never quite leaves. I can still hear it sometimes, the knocking, the whispers. I've tried everything. Therapy, moving to new cities, even changing my number. But no matter where I go, it finds me. Last week, I received another phone call. This time, there was no mistaking it. The voice on the other end was clear, crisp, as if it had been waiting to speak to me all this time. "You can't escape." I hung up immediately, but I knew. Deep down, I knew. This wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't just my mind playing tricks on me. Whatever it is, it's still out there, still reaching for me. I tried to ignore it, tried to move on with my life, but the unease never leaves. I live in a constant state of alertness. I check the locks on my doors several times before bed. I avoid looking in mirrors too long, afraid of what might be lurking behind me. But the fear, the paranoia, is the worst part. It eats away at you slowly, until you start to wonder if you're really in control of your own mind anymore. I can't stay in one place for too long. Every time I think I've outrun it, I get a text, a strange sound at night, or the flicker of shadows in the corner of my eye. I've become a ghost of myself, constantly on the move, constantly afraid. A week ago, I received another message, this one even more disturbing than the others. The number was untraceable like all the rest, but the message was different. It wasn't a voice this time. It was just a photo. It was of me, taken through my window. The angle was too precise to be a coincidence. It was taken from a dark alley, from just the right position where only someone who knew exactly where I was living could have gotten it. There was no message attached, no words, just that chilling photo. Couldn't breathe, couldn't think. I just stared at the screen, feeling the weight of it pressing against me. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. It wasn't just the apartment anymore. It wasn't even the building. It was something else, something that had attached itself to me. Whatever it was, whatever force had been awakened in that apartment, it had latched onto me like a parasite. That night, I tried to sleep, but every little noise in the apartment made me jump. The smallest creak of the floorboards, the sound of a car passing by outside. It all felt like it was getting closer. I couldn't escape it. Then I heard it again. The knock. It came from the walls, from the floorboards, and from the ceiling. It was everywhere. Not just outside my door, but inside my head. It was a sound that reverberated through me, made my bones ache. It was slow, rhythmic, deliberate. It was no longer just a physical presence. It was in my thoughts, in my very mind. And then the whispers began again. Low, too quiet to understand, but their intent was clear. We never left. I jumped out of bed, my pulse racing, sweat soaking through my shirt. I grabbed my things and ran out of the apartment, but I could feel it, that dark, consuming presence trailing behind me. It was as if it was always right there, following me wherever I went. No matter how far I ran, I couldn't outrun it. I've learned the hard way that there's no escape. I can't go back to that building. I can't face it again. But I know what's coming for me, and I know it won't stop until it gets what it wants. Maybe it's my soul. Maybe it's just the fear. All I can do now is wait. But if you ever come across an apartment like mine, one that feels too cheap, too perfect, one that calls to you in the dead of night, don't take it. Don't even look at it. Because once it has you, there's no way out. I tried to forget. I tried to push everything that happened in that cursed apartment to the back of my mind. But the fear doesn't fade. It never does. I moved again, this time across the country, far from New York, into a quiet, seemingly peaceful neighborhood in the Pacific Northwest. I thought that the isolation of the woods would help. I thought that maybe, just maybe, I could live a normal life again. But I should have known better. Nothing is normal anymore. It started with the strange dreams. They weren't just nightmares anymore. These dreams were vivid, real. I would wake up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding, feeling like I had never truly left that apartment. In my dreams, the hallway would stretch endlessly, and I would walk down it, compelled to open that same door I had fled from so long ago. When I would reach for the knob, I could feel something behind me, close, breathing on the back of my neck. The air would grow thicker, the walls closer, and when I turned around, it was always there. The figure, the shadows, they were all waiting for me. I stopped sleeping. I tried everything, medication, herbal remedies, sleep aids, but nothing worked. I was exhausted, too tired to think straight. I couldn't escape the feeling that I was being watched. Then the call started again. This time it was different. The number was blocked, but the voice? It was unmistakable. "We're coming for you." No hesitation, no ambiguity, just those words. I slammed the phone down, but I knew it wasn't a prank. It wasn't some sick joke. I could feel it, that dark energy crawling into my skin again. It was like the apartment had become a part of me, seeping into my bones, twisting everything I knew about the world. It wasn't just the apartment anymore. It was everything. I couldn't take it any longer. I couldn't live in constant fear, waiting for the next call, the next knock, the next whisper. So I did the only thing I could think of. I went to the building. I hadn't told anyone. No one knew what had happened to me. No one knew what I had been through. I wasn't even sure I was doing the right thing by going back, but I felt like I had no choice. When I stood outside the old building, it looked different. The cracks in the walls seemed more pronounced. The windows were clouded with age, and the door looked like it hadn't been touched in years. It was like the building itself was rotting, decaying, felt alive, and it was calling to me. I walked in. The familiar chill hit me the moment I crossed the threshold, and I felt the weight of its presence like an oppressive force bearing down on me. The lights flickered above me, and I heard the faintest echo of footsteps, as though someone was walking just out of sight. The knocking started immediately, but this time it wasn't just from the door. It came from every wall, from beneath the floor, from the very air around me. It was relentless. I made my way upstairs, my heart pounding with each step, dreading what I would find. When I reached my old apartment, I felt like I was suffocating. The door was closed, but it was no longer just a door. It was a gateway, something I couldn't cross, something that wanted to keep me out. But I opened it anyway. The apartment was just as I had left it. The same faded wallpaper, the same worn furniture, the same smell of dust and mildew. Nothing had changed, except for the oppressive darkness that hung in the air. Felt wrong, as if the apartment itself had been waiting for me, ready to trap me once more. Then I heard it, the unmistakable voice. "You thought you could leave." I spun around, and there it was. The figure, taller than before, more defined, with eyes like endless voids staring into me. It stepped closer, and I could feel its presence like a weight pressing on my chest. Couldn't breathe, couldn't move. The shadows in the room seemed to stretch and twist, and I realized there was no escape. This place, this thing had consumed me long ago. It had attached itself to me in ways I didn't understand, and no matter how far I ran, no matter where I went, it would always find me. The whispers started again, louder now, faster. Hundreds of voices, all clamoring at once. "You're ours." I could hear the knocking again, but it wasn't just on the door anymore. It was on the walls, the ceiling, the floor. It was everywhere. And then the walls began to close in. I could feel the apartment shrinking, squeezing me, trapping me in a place that had no escape. I knew then that I had made a grave mistake by coming back. This wasn't just about the apartment. It was about something far older, far darker. Something that had been waiting for the right moment to take me. I don't know how long I've been here now. Time feels warped, like the walls themselves are stretching time into eternity. But I'm still alive. For now. If you're reading this, please take this as a warning. Whatever you do, don't let curiosity lead you to a place like mine. Don't step into an apartment that feels too good to be true, because the thing inside is patient. And once it's found you, it will never let go. Trust me, I know. And if you hear knocking, don't answer. It's been days or maybe weeks. I've lost track of time. In this place, time doesn't matter. The knocking never stops. The whispers never fade. I've tried everything. I've screamed. I've begged. I've even tried to break the walls, to escape, but every time I think I'm free, the walls close in tighter. The figure, the darkness, they are here, always watching, always waiting. It's like I'm in a nightmare that never ends. A loop with no escape. I tried to leave once more. I thought maybe if I just run far enough, I could break free of this curse. I ran down the hall, past the apartment door, down the stairs, through the building's dark, hollow halls, but no matter where I turned, the door was always in front of me. I'd be walking through one hallway, and it would appear ahead of me in the distance, as if I'd never left. It's as though the building itself is alive, a living trap. The last time I saw the figure, I tried to fight it. I knew it was futile, but I wasn't ready to just accept my fate. I had to know. I had to understand what it wanted from me. I asked it, screamed at it, demanded an answer, and it spoke. Not in a voice I could hear with my ears, but in my mind. You are the price. You were chosen. I felt its presence get closer. It's cold, consuming energy flooding my mind, and I understood. The apartment wasn't a random place. It wasn't an accident. It was a ritual, a trap set long ago. I had become a part of it the moment I set foot inside. It needed someone to feed on, someone to trap, and I had unknowingly signed my soul away. The worst part? I know now that there is no escape. There is no fighting it. The thing that haunts this apartment, this entity, it doesn't need to kill you. It just needs to keep you, to break you down, piece by piece, until you are nothing but a shadow of who you once were. To torment you until you forget what it's like to be free. It's been days since I tried to leave, and now I've come to terms with it. The figure is here in the room with me. The knocking is constant, but it's not coming from the walls anymore. It's coming from within me, from the very core of my being. I can feel it inside my chest, in my veins. The whispers are becoming my thoughts. The shadows are becoming my skin. And I know now, there is no going back. There's only the darkness. I hear the knocking again, but it's not from the door. It's from behind me. I turn around, but I already know what's there. The shadows shift, the figure steps forward, and I can feel it reaching into me, pulling at the last remnants of who I was. I can't run anymore, but maybe that's the point. If you're reading this, if you hear the knocking, don't go in. Don't make the same mistake I did, because once it has you, it will never let you go. And once it's done with you, it moves on to the next.